Imagine losing everything, your home, your stability, not to a tragic accident, but to the betrayal of the one person who promised to protect you. That was my life after my parents died. My aunt sold my inheritance behind my back, leaving me with nothing, sleeping on the streets. I thought I was finished, but a dark family secret would destroy her world and rebuild mine. Before I tell you the secret that saved my life, subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The silence in the house after they were gone was a physical weight, pressing down on me with an intensity that threatened to crush the air from my lungs. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, felt like a hollow echo of the laughter and life that had filled these walls just weeks before. My parents, my anchors, my world, had vanished in a cruel, abrupt twist of fate, leaving behind a void so vast it felt as though the very ground beneath me had crumbled. I was adrift, a fragile boat tossed in a tumultuous sea of grief, desperately searching for anything, any small handhold, to keep from sinking entirely into the dark abyss of despair. The world, as I knew it, had simply ceased to exist, replaced by a bewildering, desolate landscape of loss. It was then, in that suffocating darkness, that my aunt emerged, a figure of seemingly unwavering strength and composure. She swept in like a carefully orchestrated calm after the storm, her arms open, her voice a soothing balm, promising solace. "You're not alone, dear," she'd murmured, stroking my hair with a touch that felt both comforting and strangely calculating. I clung to her, a drowning person grasping at a lifeline, convinced she was the answer, the only one who could guide me through the murky waters of my unbearable sorrow. Perhaps you know this feeling, don't you? That raw, primal need for someone, anyone, to simply be there when your entire universe has imploded around you. Her control was subtle at first, masked by an overwhelming show of concern and an efficiency that, in my dazed state, I mistook for genuine compassion. She took charge of everything: the funeral arrangements, the endless paperwork, the sympathetic calls from relatives and friends that I was too numb to handle. Her voice, soft and reassuring, navigated the complexities of probate, estate planning, and all the daunting legalities that loomed like insurmountable mountains before my grief-stricken eyes. She was constantly by my side, a shadow of support, whispering guidance, and making decisions that, at the time, seemed unequivocally in my best interest. Looking back, there was a quiet, insidious undertow beneath her seemingly benevolent facade. Her advice, always delivered with a gentle smile, gradually nudged me towards choices that, unbeknownst to me, served her agenda more than mine. "It's too much for you right now," she'd often say, dismissing my feeble attempts to understand the intricate details of my parents' estate. "Let me handle it. You need to grieve." And so I let her. My trust was absolute, my gratitude boundless, blinding me to the subtle tightening of her grip, the barely perceptible shift in her eyes when certain documents were signed. Grief, I've learned, is a potent anesthetic, dulling not only pain but also perception, making you vulnerable to the wolves in sheep's clothing. The first whisper of betrayal arrived not from her, but from an outside source, a casual comment from a distant relative at a family gathering that pierced my fog of mourning. "Heard your aunts found a buyer for the house, then?" The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, like shards of ice. I remember the immediate jolt, a sickening lurch in my stomach, followed by a frantic denial. It must be a mistake, a misunderstanding, gossip. My aunt would never, she couldn't. My home, the very sanctuary of my childhood memories, the last tangible link to my parents, being sold? Without my knowledge, without my consent? The notion was too monstrous to comprehend. But the whispers grew louder, transforming into insistent murmurs that echoed in every conversation, every knowing glance. Soon, a formal letter arrived, stark black print on crisp white paper, confirming the unthinkable. The house was under contract, the sale proceeding. The cold truth slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. My aunt, my supposed protector, the one I had trusted implicitly, had orchestrated this behind my back, a clandestine act of treachery. The facade shattered, revealing the calculating, ruthless stranger beneath. It was as if she had not merely pulled the rug out from under me, but had set fire to the entire foundation of my world. The eviction notice came next, an official decree sealing my fate, granting me a terrifyingly short window of time to vacate the premises. My home, the only place I had ever truly belonged, was no longer mine. The shock was paralyzing, dissolving into an incredulous horror. How could this be happening? How could someone so close, someone who had sworn to protect me, leave me utterly bereft, cast out onto the streets? It was more than losing a house. It was losing my history, my roots, my very sense of self. The feeling was primal, an ancestral fear of being dispossessed, stripped of everything that defined me. The pain was not just emotional. It was a visceral, stabbing sensation, a sharp knife twisting in my gut with every passing hour. My chest tightened, my breath hitched, and a persistent, dull ache settled deep in my bones. Why? I screamed into the empty rooms, the question echoing back to me in a deafening silence. There were no answers, only the cold, hard reality of betrayal and imminent homelessness. The walls that once cradled my innocence now felt like a prison, trapping me in a nightmare from which there was no awakening, no escape, only the relentless march towards an uncertain, terrifying future. Have you ever felt that kind of pain? So profound it steals your voice, leaving only a silent, desperate plea? The final walk through the house was a blur of unshed tears, each step a testament to a life stolen, a future derailed. I ran my hand along the familiar banister, tracing the worn patterns in the wood, a futile attempt to absorb the last vestiges of warmth. Each room, once bursting with life and laughter, now felt hollow, an empty shell drained of its essence. It wasn't just a house, it was a mausoleum of memories, a shrine to a past that was being brutally erased. The air hung thick with ghosts, the specters of my parents, their love, their dreams for me, all fading into the cold, in different shadows of impending loss. As I stepped out for the last time, the door, closing behind me with a quiet, final click, a profound sense of helplessness washed over me. This wasn't merely saying goodbye to a home. It was bidding farewell to a part of myself, an identity inextricably linked to those walls. The streets stretched out before me, a vast, indifferent expanse, offering no solace, no direction. Perhaps you know what I'm talking about, that disorienting feeling of being utterly alone, disconnected when the ground beneath you disappears and you're left floating, untethered in the unforgiving void. This loss, this profound dispossession, cut deeper than any physical wound. The harsh reality of my new existence struck with a brutal force, far more agonizing than any physical blow. One moment, I had a home, a history, a future stretching out before me, however clouded by grief. The next, I was adrift, a ghost haunting the city streets, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the crushing weight of betrayal. Every day was a desperate scramble for survival, a humiliating dance with charity and the meager offerings of strangers. The kindness was often tinged with pity, a look in their eyes that drilled into my soul and reminded me of my utter destitution. The nights were long, cold, and punctuated by the gnawing ache of hunger, a constant, dull companion that never left my side. Despair, a thick, suffocating blanket, threatened to consume me whole, rendering every sunrise a cruel reminder that the struggle would begin anew. The image of my aunt, once a beacon of false comfort, now haunted my every waking moment, a specter of deceit that materialized in the shadows of alleys and the reflections in grimy shop windows. Her face, her saccharine smile, the very sound of her voice, echoed in my mind, turning what little sleep I managed to snatch into restless nightmares. Resentment, a bitter, corrosive poison, began to seep into every fiber of my being, slowly but surely transforming the raw wound of betrayal into a hardened scar. Yet, Paradoxically, from this consuming anger, a different kind of fire began to smolder deep within me, a nascent determination. It was a fierce, protective flame that whispered, "No, I won't be broken." Perhaps you've felt that urgent need to rise, haven't you? Even when the very ground beneath your feet has vanished. Life on the margins was a stark, unforgiving education. I learned to blend into the background, to become invisible, to navigate a world that seemed designed to overlook and dismiss people like me. The casual glances of passers-by, a mixture of disinterest, fear, or sometimes that piercing pity, were a constant reminder of my fallen status. Shame burned hot in my cheeks, a silent confession of my vulnerability, yet it mingled inextricably with a potent, simmering revolt against the injustice that had landed me here. Every memory of the house, the scent of my mother's cooking, the sound of my father's laughter echoing in the hallway, the feel of the sunlight streaming into my bedroom window, was a fresh stab to the heart, an undeniable echo of what had been cruelly stolen. There were nights when the cold bit deep, when hunger gnawed relentlessly, and the sheer hopelessness of it all threatened to drag me under. The abyss, a gaping maw of despair, beckoned with its promise of oblivion, a release from the relentless struggle. Giving up, surrendering to the overwhelming tide of misery, seemed the most logical, the most painless option. I stood on the precipice, teetering, the world a blurry, indifferent void below. But then a flicker, a fleeting memory of my parents' encouraging smiles, a whisper of their unwavering belief in me, would pierce through the darkness. It was a fragile, almost imperceptible thread, yet it was enough to pull me back from the brink, to cling to the smallest sliver of a reason to endure. In that moment of profound despair, balanced precariously on the edge of utter surrender, something crystallized within me. It wasn't a grand declaration, nor a vengeful roar, but a quiet, solemn vow whispered only to myself, a secret promise etched into the very core of my being. One day I would reclaim what was mine. One day justice would be served. It wasn't about cold-hearted revenge, not yet. It was about something far more fundamental, the desperate need to reclaim my dignity, to mend the gaping wound in my soul, to prove to myself and to the world that I was more than just a victim. It was the genesis of a resolve that would, in time, become an unshakable force. Slowly, painstakingly, a semblance of stability began to materialize from the chaotic wreckage of my life. It wasn't a grand rescue, no dramatic intervention, but a series of small, almost imperceptible opportunities that coalesced into an unlikely refuge. A kind soul offered a corner to sleep, sheltered from the biting wind. A transient job provided enough to quiet the gnawing hunger, and sporadic gestures of human decency reminded me that not everyone in the world was like her. These moments of unexpected grace were like tiny, flickering candles in a vast darkness. They provided a much-needed reprieve, a chance to catch my breath, but they were far from a cure. The deep wounds of betrayal and loss still festered, raw and exposed beneath the surface of this newfound, fragile safety. The days morphed into a relentless, exhausting routine, a monotonous cycle of small tasks and meager earnings. There was no joy in it, no soaring ambitions, just the grim determination to put one foot in front of the other. Waking up each morning felt like starting a marathon with lead weights tied to my ankles, the finish line an invisible, distant dream. Every interaction, every small decision, was a test of endurance, chipping away at my spirit. Yet, within this grueling rhythm, a subtle transformation began. Each small step, no matter how arduous, was a step away from the abyss. The climb was steep, the path often obscured, but the direction was undeniably upward, away from the bottom. The weight of absence, however, remained an ever-present burden. The phantom ache of a home I no longer possessed, the echo of my parents' voices in the quiet moments, the vivid memories of a life that had been so abruptly severed. These were not things that simply faded with time. They were open wounds, perpetually throbbing beneath the thin veneer of my new routine. I learned Not to heal them entirely, for some scars run too deep, but to live with the pain, to carry it. Over time, that pain, that constant reminder of what I had lost, began to transmute. It didn't diminish, but it hardened, becoming less of a burden and more of a strange, burning fuel, pushing me forward. There were moments, rare and fleeting, that felt like small triumphs, landing a consistent shift, affording a proper meal without counting every penny, or simply making it through a particularly brutal day without succumbing to despair. These weren't grand victories by any measure of a normal life, but to me they were monumental. Each small success was a testament to my burgeoning resilience, a defiant flicker of hope in the persistent gloom. They were proof that despite everything, a spark of light still resided within me, refusing to be extinguished. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was the promise of something better, a distant glimmer of possibility. The forced maturity of my situation was undeniable. I had aged years in a matter of months, shedding the last vestiges of youthful naivete under the relentless hammer of adversity. The pain hadn't broken me, not entirely. Instead, it had forged me, hardening my resolve, sharpening my instincts, and stripping away all that was superficial. I learned to discern true character, to appreciate simple kindnesses, and to value my own inner strength in ways I never thought possible. This crucible of suffering had chiseled away the unnecessary, leaving behind a tougher, more resilient core. I often wonder if you, too, Andrade, having built and created, have faced moments where adversity didn't just challenge you, but fundamentally reshaped you. Perhaps you've been through something similar, where the weight of hardship, though crushing at times, ultimately carved out a deeper understanding, a clearer vision of your own capabilities. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? That the deepest lessons are so often delivered through the harshest trials, teaching us more about ourselves than any period of comfort ever could. This new, raw version of myself was far from perfect. I was guarded, wary, and carried the indelible marks of my ordeal. The innocent trust one once possessed had been irrevocably shattered, replaced by a cautious skepticism. Laughter came less easily, and a certain shadow clung to my eyes, a silent testament to the battles fought and survived. Yet, beneath the scars, something undeniably powerful had begun to bloom, a quiet confidence in my ability to endure, to adapt, to keep moving forward, even when the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. Every sunrise was a renewed commitment, every sunset a small victory for having made it through another day. The hunger, the cold, the loneliness, they hadn't disappeared, but I had learned to coexist with them, to push past their relentless demands. My focus narrowed to the immediate, the tangible, securing the next meal, finding a safe place to rest, performing the job at hand to the best of my ability. This enforced simplicity, born of necessity, instilled a profound appreciation for the basics of survival, a groundedness that few ever truly experience. The memory of my aunt and the life she had stolen was a constant, simmering undercurrent, a quiet rage that never truly extinguished. It wasn't an all-consuming fire anymore, but a persistent ember, glowing in the back of my mind, a silent promise of what was yet to come. It was the driving force behind my struggle, the secret purpose that kept me from fully surrendering to the fatigue and despair. Every small gain, every inch of progress, was a small step towards a future where justice, in some form, would finally be served. This wasn't a story of healing, not yet. It was a testament to resilience, to the raw, stubborn refusal to be defeated. It was about finding fragments of strength in the rubble of a shattered life, about learning to walk again with broken wings. The pain was still there, a constant companion, but it no longer defined me. It had become part of me, a dark thread woven into the fabric of my being, making me stronger, wiser, and more determined than I had ever been before. Years blurred into a quiet continuum, each day a measured rhythm of work and solitude, each season fading into the next with an almost imperceptible grace. The raw edges of my past had softened, smoothed by the relentless passage of time, Yet the scar of injustice remained, a faint but indelible mark beneath the surface of my reconstructed life. I had learned to live with it, to incorporate it into the very fabric of my being, much like an old injury that aches on cold days but no longer cripples. It wasn't a constant, burning agony, but a permanent reminder, a silent vow that echoed in the quiet corners of my mind. I had survived, but I had not forgotten. How do you move on from something that fundamentally altered your existence without truly letting go of the truth behind it? Then one unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, a seemingly innocuous phone call shattered the carefully constructed peace of my routine. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number, and I almost let it go to voicemail, accustomed to ignoring the incessant hum of unsolicited intrusions. But something compelled me to answer. A voice, aged and somewhat reedy, introduced himself as Arthur Finch, an attorney. Finch. The name meant nothing to me. He claimed to have represented my parents years ago and had something important to discuss. My immediate reaction was a cold wave of suspicion. An old lawyer, suddenly appearing out of nowhere, talking about my deceased parents? It sounded almost too convenient, a ghost from a past I had painstakingly walled off. My guard immediately went up, a reflex honed by years of hard lessons. The world had taught me that unexpected kindness often harbored a hidden agenda, and grand pronouncements usually masked a deeper disappointment. Was this some new scheme, another cruel trick designed to extract what little I had left, or perhaps simply to dredge up painful memories for someone else's amusement? The fear of being vulnerable again, of having my carefully mended heart broken once more, was a palpable physical sensation. I wanted to hang up, to dismiss him, to retreat into the safe, predictable confines of my solitary existence. The risk felt too high, the potential for pain too great. Yet Mr. Finch possessed a peculiar, old-fashioned tenacity. He didn't push aggressively, but his calm, steady insistence conveyed an urgency that slowly chipped away at my deep-seated skepticism. He spoke with a quiet authority, mentioning details about my parents that only someone truly connected to their past would know, details that resonated with a forgotten corner of my memory. "This isn't about anything trivial," he'd said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. "It concerns your parents' legacy, and something that has been overlooked for a very long time. It is vital that we speak." His voice, though soft, carried the weight of years, of secrets, of untold stories. After several days of his persistent yet polite calls, a fragile thread of curiosity, stronger than my fear, finally compelled me to agree to a meeting. It was a leap of faith, a tentative step into the unknown. We settled on a time, and he gave me the address, an office building nestled in an older, quieter part of the city, far from the gleaming towers of corporate law. The address felt as aged and worn as the voice on the phone, somehow fitting the unusual nature of his call. There was a sense of fateful inevitability about it, as if this meeting had been waiting for me, patient and unseen, all these years. The building itself seemed to breathe history, its brick facade weathered by decades of city life, the brass plaque next to the door tarnished with time. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper, leather, and dust, the unmistakable aroma of a forgotten past. Mr. Finch's office was cluttered yet organized, piles of ancient-looking files stacked on shelves, a venerable wooden desk dominating the room. He rose to greet me, a man whose gentle eyes held a wisdom that seemed to stretch far beyond his years, his demeanor radiating an almost reassuring calm. He invited me to sit, and the silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with anticipation. He cleared his throat, adjusting his spectacles, and then, without preamble, delivered the words that would irrevocably alter the course of my life, words that struck me with the force of a sudden revelation. "Your parents," he began, his gaze steady and unwavering, "they left a will." The world tilted on its axis. A will. How could this be? My aunt had been so definitive, so absolute in her pronouncements about their lack of formal arrangements. about the immediate need to sell everything to cover debts. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to dismiss it as a cruel joke, another manipulation. A will. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, stirring a tempest of conflicting emotions within me. Hope, fragile and almost terrifying, began to unfurl its tentative wings in the deepest recesses of my heart, a hope I hadn't dared to entertain for years. But hand in hand with it came a chilling dread. What if this was just another layer of deception, another elaborate scheme destined to leave me even more broken than before? What if this glimmer of light was merely a prelude to another crushing darkness? The silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic. I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to reconcile this impossible truth with the narrative I had been fed, the bitter reality I had lived. My parents had been so meticulous, so organized. It had always felt wrong that they would leave nothing but chaos behind. Could it be true? Could there have been something, anything, that my aunt had deliberately concealed? The questions swirled, a dizzying maelstrom of confusion and nascent understanding. Could you imagine the shock, Andrade, the sheer disbelief, the flicker of a distant, almost forgotten dream suddenly igniting against the backdrop of years of bleak reality? It was a moment suspended between past and future, between profound despair and the tantalizing possibility of redemption. The faint scent of dust in that old office suddenly smelled like the turning of a new page, a chapter waiting to be written, filled with answers I desperately needed. My heart, long dormant, began to beat with a strange, unfamiliar rhythm, a drumbeat of both apprehension and an undeniable, powerful hope. Mr. Finch's words hung in the air, echoing the impossible. Your parents, they left a will. My mind reeled, grappling with the sheer audacity of this revelation, a direct contradiction to everything my aunt had so convincingly asserted. He seemed to sense my disbelief, my internal struggle to reconcile this new information with the hardened narrative of betrayal I had carried for so long. With a gentle sigh, he reached into an ancient-looking, leather-bound briefcase, extracting a folder thick with age and filled with yellowed documents. The rustle of the paper, the scent of time, seemed to carry with it the very essence of the past, finally ready to surrender its long-held truths. He placed a single, crisp, legal document before me on the desk, its faded ink a testament to its long slumber. This, he said, his voice grave, cutting through my swirling thoughts, is a true copy of your parents' last will and testament, formally executed and lodged with my firm for safekeeping years ago. He gestured for me to read, his eyes fixed on my face, waiting for the impact. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the paper, the words blurring at first as my eyes scanned the familiar names, the formal language. My parents' signatures, undeniable and beloved, brought a fresh pang of grief, yet also a flicker of something new, a deep, profound curiosity. Every line I read, every legal clause, chipped away at the foundation of my aunt's narrative, revealing it as a carefully constructed lie. Then I saw it, tucked away within the legalese, a clause, seemingly innocuous at first glance, yet it sent a jolt through me. It wasn't about monetary inheritance in the traditional sense, or the direct transfer of property. Instead, it was a peculiar, almost cryptic condition, a specific instruction that implied a delay, a waiting period, and a set of responsibilities. It spoke of a trust of guardianship, and critically, of an appointed executor. And it was this executor, named explicitly in the document, who was given the primary responsibility for my care and the management of their assets until a certain age or event. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. The name of the executor was unmistakably my aunt. A cold wave washed over me, a realization that was both shocking and sickeningly familiar. This wasn't just about a stolen house. It was about a deliberate perversion of my parents' wishes, a systematic dismantling of their carefully laid plans. The clause was a puzzle piece, but one that immediately connected to the gaping hole in my life. It was a clear outline of her deception, a meticulously designed framework that she had completely ignored, exploited, or outright destroyed. Her actions were no longer just opportunistic. They were a direct defiance of my parents' final wishes, revealed now in black and white, undeniable and damning. Mr. Finch leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his expression a mixture of solemnity and a quiet resolve. "There's more," he stated, his gaze piercing. "Much more than this document reveals on its surface. Your parents were prudent, and they were also aware of certain vulnerabilities within your family dynamic. This will was designed not just to ensure your future, but to protect you from specific forces." His eyes lingered on mine, conveying a depth of understanding that chilled me. This isn't just a matter of property or money. It touches upon a deeper, more complicated history, one that involves your aunt and secrets that have been buried for a long, long time. He paused, letting his words sink in, allowing me to process the implications. My mind raced, trying to grasp the enormity of what he was implying. My aunt's manipulative nature, her insatiable greed. Had my parents somehow foreseen it? Had they tried to protect me even from beyond the grave? It was a bewildering thought, but one that offered a strange sort of comfort. He then pushed a single, small, aged photograph across the desk towards me. It was a faded image of a family gathering from long ago, my parents smiling, a younger version of my aunt beside them. He pointed to a figure in the background, almost out of frame, a stern-looking man I didn't recognize. "This man," he said, his voice firm as key. "His name was Thomas Thorne. He was your mother's uncle, and a rather reclusive figure. He held information, and perhaps secrets, that even your parents might not have fully understood the implications of until much later." The name was unfamiliar, a whisper from a distant past I knew nothing about. Thomas Thorne. It was the first concrete clue, a name to anchor the rising tide of mystery. It felt like the planting of a seed, small and unassuming, yet holding the promise of a vast, sprawling revelation. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house anymore. It was about unearthing a truth, a family history deliberately concealed, and a legacy that stretched far beyond material possessions. The air in the room, once stale with the scent of old paper, now crackled with the electric charge of impending discovery. Can you imagine, Andrade, the sheer weight of that moment? The revelation that the injustice wasn't just an isolated act, but possibly part of a much larger, more intricate web of deceit spun years ago? It was a terrifying thought, but also an exhilarating one. The fight for my home, for my dignity, had just expanded. It was no longer a simple battle. It was a deep dive into the hidden currents of my own family's past, and I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones, that I was finally ready to face whatever secrets lay buried there. With Mr. Finch as my unlikely guide, I plunged headfirst into the labyrinthine depths of my family's past, a history far more tangled and shadowed than I had ever imagined. Days bled into weeks, spent sifting through dusty archives, deciphering faded ledgers and poring over yellowed photographs that held secrets behind their smiling faces. We sought out distant relatives, old family acquaintances, and even former employees who had known my parents and their siblings. Each conversation was a delicate dance, coaxing fragmented memories and forgotten anecdotes from reluctant lips, stitching together a mosaic of events that, when viewed from this new, enlightened perspective, began to reconfigure everything I thought I knew. Old memories, once benign, now pulsed with hidden meaning, replaying in my mind with a sinister undertone I had been too innocent, too trusting, to perceive before. The discoveries that emerged from this painstaking excavation were not merely shocking. They were profoundly sickening. The image of my aunt, the one I had clung to in my darkest hour, the protector whose hand I had grasped, disintegrated completely. What emerged was a cold, calculating opportunist, a master manipulator who had woven a sophisticated web of deceit around her loved ones for decades. There were stories of financial misdealings, of whispered rumors dismissed as jealousy, of subtle psychological warfare waged against anyone who stood between her and what she desired. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had been betraying people, including members of her own family, for a lifetime. My innocence, once shattered, now felt like a naive delusion. It became chillingly clear that my dispossession was not an isolated act of cruelty, but a well-worn pattern in her life. We uncovered instances where she had systematically undermined, isolated, or financially exploited others for her own gain, often under the guise of helping them. The sale of my parents' house was not an impulsive decision born of a desperate situation. It was a deliberate, calculated move within a long-established playbook, executed with precision and ruthless efficiency. She was a predator, always circling, waiting for the opportune moment of vulnerability to strike. The realization left me breathless, not with shock, but with a horrifying sense of understanding. You realize, don't you, that true evil often masquerades as kindness, making it almost impossible to detect until it's too late? As we delved deeper, following the faint trail left by the enigmatic Thomas Thorne, an even more profound secret began to surface, one that cast a new light on my parents' apparent financial situation. It wasn't just about the will or the house. There was a hidden inheritance, a substantial one, that had been deliberately obscured, possibly from my aunt's knowledge, or even from my parents' full understanding of its true value until much later in their lives. This wealth was tied to a complex, almost forgotten family legacy, a secret tucked away within a secret, a testament to my parents' foresight, or perhaps their desperate attempt to safeguard what was truly theirs from my aunt's rapacious grasp. This revelation shifted the entire landscape of my struggle, adding an unexpected layer of immense stakes. Every fresh revelation, every painful truth unearthed, was no longer just a source of anguish. It was ammunition. The raw, guttural anger that had consumed me after being cast out now transformed into a cold, strategic fire. My quest for justice became a meticulously planned campaign, a focused drive to expose her, to strip away her veneer of respectability, and to make her pay for every single wrong she had inflicted. The goal wasn't just to reclaim what was mine. It was to dismantle her world, piece by agonizing piece. Can you feel the satisfaction building, Andrade? That quiet, potent sense of empowerment that comes from knowing you finally hold the cards, even before the final blow is struck? This wasn't merely about personal vengeance. It was about reclaiming the very truth of my family's history from her grasping hands. The stage was set, meticulously arranged down to the last detail, a precise trap disguised as a casual invitation. Under the guise of discussing some old family heirlooms, Mr. Finch had subtly orchestrated a meeting, inviting my aunt to a neutral, yet strategically chosen location. It was a private room, discreetly arranged to offer no easy escape, just a single, heavy door and a window overlooking a bustling street. I arrived early, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, a heavy, cold stone in my stomach. Every piece of evidence, every damning document, every carefully transcribed testimony lay within reach, ready to be deployed. The air crackled with a silent, volatile energy, anticipating the inevitable storm. My nerves were taut, a violin string stretched to its breaking point, yet beneath that tremor lay a core of icy resolve, forged in the fires of betrayal. I had rehearsed this moment countless times in my mind, anticipating her every possible reaction. The feigned surprise, the indignant denial, the swift turn to victimhood. Each lie she might utter, each manipulation she might attempt, had been catalogued and countered. The memory of my parents' faces, of my lost home, of the desolate nights I'd spent on the streets, fueled my determination. This wasn't just about truth. It was about every tear, every unanswered why that had haunted my waking hours. She arrived precisely on time, sweeping into the room with that familiar air of polished confidence, a carefully constructed facade of grace and charm. Her smile was wide, her eyes glittering with an almost predatory amusement, as if she already knew she held all the cards. "Darling!" she exclaimed, her voice dripping with artificial warmth, reaching out as if to embrace me. I recoiled almost imperceptibly, maintaining a polite, neutral distance. She settled into her chair, oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant of the chilling atmosphere, her composure an arrogant testament to her belief in her own untouchability. The game for her was already won, and she was merely here for the final flourish. Mr. Finch, ever the calm orchestrator, began with a polite preamble, but his words swiftly cut to the chase. He presented the will first, the original, undeniable document, placing it directly in front of her. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, that old thing," she scoffed, attempting to brush it aside. "A silly formality. My brother and sister-in-law were never one for proper planning." But as Mr. Finch began to calmly read the specific clauses, the ones she had so flagrantly violated, her dismissiveness began to crack. Her eyes darted from the document to my impassive face, searching for a sign of weakness, a hint of the gullibility she expected. Then came the stack of financial records, the documented transfers, the clandestine sale of the house, each transaction meticulously traced, leaving no room for doubt or misdirection. Each piece of paper was a nail in her coffin, hammered in with precision, her composure visibly frayed, replaced by a growing agitation. She tried to interrupt, to spin a counter-narrative, to accuse me of fabricating evidence, her voice growing shriller with each failed attempt. "These are lies. You've been manipulated. This is a cruel joke." But the cold, hard facts, laid bare and undeniable, rendered her protests pathetic, hollow echoes in the room. The mask, her lifelong performance as the benevolent protector, began to crack, then crumble into irreparable pieces. Her features contorted, revealing the true face beneath, a visage hardened by greed, contorted by a desperate, cornered rage. The sweet smile vanished, replaced by a snarl. The gentle eyes narrowed into slits of venom. The cynical, cruel manipulator, unburdened by conscience or empathy, stood starkly revealed. There was no more pretense, no more hiding behind carefully chosen words or practiced gestures. This was the raw, unadulterated ugliness that had cost me everything. "You took everything from me," I stated, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor that shook my core. "You stole my home, my family's legacy, and years of my life. You used my grief as a weapon, but no more." I laid out her entire pattern of deceit, not just against me, but against others we had uncovered, painting a complete picture of her decades-long predation. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a verdict delivered with the full weight of irrefutable truth. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear finally piercing through her arrogance as she realized the extent of what I knew and what I had come to do. She shrank back in her chair, deflated, defeated. The fight drained from her, leaving behind only the hollow shell of a once formidable woman. There were no more lies, no more accusations, just a silent, venomous stare. In that moment, watching her facade collapse, a strange, bittersweet satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't the triumphant roar I might have expected, but a quiet, profound sense of release. The years of suffering, the relentless pursuit of justice, had finally culminated in this precise, devastating moment. The vengeance, so long simmering, was finally savored, cool and clear on my tongue. She knew she had lost, not just the legal battle that was surely to follow, but something far more significant: her reputation, her carefully crafted image, her perceived power. Every false step, every deceitful act, was now laid bare for the world to see. The house, my true home, was no longer a distant memory, but a tangible reality, a place I was on the cusp of reclaiming. Yet the victory, while immense, carried with it a lingering taste of bitterness. The revelation of such deep-seated malice within my own family was a wound that, even in triumph, would never fully heal. But it was a victory nonetheless, a testament to resilience, to the unyielding power of truth. The battle was won, the first step towards reclaiming not just property, but my past, my dignity, and my future. It was the end of one devastating chapter and the hard-won beginning of another. And perhaps, Andrade, you understand that feeling, don't you? That complex blend of relief, sadness, and quiet triumph when a long, arduous struggle finally yields the justice you fought so hard for, proving that even from the ruins, something true and powerful can be rebuilt. The legal battle to reclaim my parents' house was a grinding, methodical process, a stark contrast to the dramatic confrontation that had preceded it. There were countless forms to fill, endless phone calls, and the slow, deliberate dance of legal proceedings. Each signature, each official stamp felt like a deliberate act of defiance against the injustice I had suffered, a small victory in itself. Mr. Finch, with his unwavering diligence, guided me through every bureaucratic entanglement, every deliberate delay thrown up by my aunt's now desperate legal team. It was tedious, frustrating, but with every document signed, every legal hurdle cleared, I felt a tangible sense of purpose. Each piece of paper wasn't just a legal formality. It was a brick laid, a beam raised in the slow, painstaking reconstruction of my rightful home and, by extension, my shattered life. The victory, hard-won and meticulously earned, was no longer just a distant dream, but an imminent reality. The day I finally re-entered the house, legally and unequivocally its owner once more, was a strange fusion of joy and profound melancholy. The air was thick with the scent of dust and disuse, a silent testament to its prolonged emptiness. Each room held 1,000 echoes of a life once lived, a chorus of laughter, whispered secrets, and quiet moments that still resonated within the walls. This time, however, the memories weren't a source of torment, but a gentle embrace. The house wasn't just a building. It was a sanctuary, a canvas onto which I could paint a future, built upon the foundations of a past reclaimed. It was no longer a place of pain, but a vessel for healing, a testament to resilience, a space where the stolen past could finally be remade, lovingly and intentionally, into a cherished present. It was amidst this process of emotional and physical reclamation that the magnitude of Mr. Finch's earlier revelation fully dawned on me. The secret inheritance hinted at during our earliest meetings proved to be far more substantial than I could have ever conceived. My parents, it turned out, had indeed been meticulous, not just in their will, but in their quiet, strategic investments and the carefully hidden assets passed down through Thomas Thorne's legacy. This was not merely enough to regain my former life. It was a fortune, a treasure trove born not from my aunt's malice, but from a deeper, more profound family history that had bypassed her entirely. It had sprung from the very pain that had consumed me, an unexpected windfall from the ashes of betrayal. The sheer weight of it, the dizzying prospect of such power and responsibility, was almost as overwhelming as the initial loss had been. The wealth presented a new kind of challenge, a profound moral dilemma. What does one do with such an unexpected bounty, especially when it arrives intertwined with so much personal trauma? Was it merely for my own comfort, to build a life of luxury and forget the past? Or did it carry a greater obligation, a responsibility to honor the memory of my parents, their quiet wisdom, and the arduous struggle that had led me to this point? The thought of simply spending it on myself felt hollow, almost a betrayal of the journey. This fortune, born of silent resilience and uncovered truth, demanded more than mere self-indulgence. It beckoned towards a purpose, a legacy that transcended personal gain. As for my aunt, the wheels of justice, though slow, ground inexorably forward. The comprehensive evidence Mr. Finch had amassed, combined with the public exposure that followed the legal proceedings, left her with no recourse. She faced not only the loss of any claim to my parents' estate and her immediate financial ruin, but also the public shame and widespread condemnation that comes with being unmasked as a fraud. Her carefully constructed facade, the one that had fooled so many for so long, was irrevocably shattered. The whispers of sympathy she once commanded turned to murmurs of disgust. It wasn't the sort of vengeful triumph I might have imagined in my darkest hours, but rather a profound, quiet sense of closure. Justice, in its own deliberate way, had been served. I could finally breathe a deep, cleansing breath, unburdened by the weight of her deceit. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake not just wreckage, but a landscape forever reshaped. The house, once a stolen memory, then a battleground for justice, was now more than just a home. It was a living monument to resilience, a testament to the unyielding spirit that refused to be extinguished. Every creak of the old floorboards, every shaft of sunlight filtering through the familiar windows, no longer evoked the pain of loss but the quiet triumph of reclamation. I walked its halls with a renewed sense of purpose, my eyes no longer clouded by grief or anger, but open to the infinite possibilities of a future I had fought so hard to build. The world, too, seemed different, viewed through the lens of profound transformation, every detail sharper, every moment more precious. The unexpected fortune, that vast inheritance unearthed from the secret corners of my family's past, became not an end in itself, but a means to a greater purpose. After much deliberation, I decided to channel a significant portion of it into initiatives that supported others who had faced similar injustices, particularly those dispossessed or exploited by unscrupulous figures. It felt right, a way to honor my parents' memory not just with wealth, but with compassion and action. Their silent legacy, once hidden, now spoke volumes through the work being done, creating opportunities, fostering justice, and rebuilding lives. It was an affirmation that from the deepest pain, true good could emerge, echoing their quiet integrity in a way I knew would make them proud. The simmering hatred for my aunt, the venomous resentment that had fueled so much of my early struggle, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to dissipate. It wasn't forgiveness, not in the traditional sense, for some betrayals run too deep for simple absolution. Rather, it was a profound realization that her power over me had vanished the moment justice was served. Her malice, her greed, her shattered reputation were her burden to bear, not mine. The hollow space she had carved out in my life, that void of trust and family, was gradually filled not by reconciliation, but by my own burgeoning strength, by the meaningful work I pursued, and by the genuine connections I forged. My energy, once consumed by the pursuit of vengeance, was now directed towards building a future. This arduous journey, from naive trust to crushing betrayal, from desperate survival to unexpected triumph, had been my most profound education. It taught me that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the unshakable integrity of one's character, in the resilience of the human spirit, and in the wisdom gleaned from the crucible of adversity. My parents' truest inheritance was not the fortune they left behind, but the values they instilled, values that endured even when everything else seemed lost. Perhaps you, Andrade, as an entrepreneur and content creator, understand this deeply, that the most transformative experiences often arise from the greatest challenges, forging a strength and insight that no comfort could ever provide. Finally, after years of relentless struggle, of living on the edge of despair, of fighting for every inch of reclaimed ground, a profound sense of peace settled within me. It wasn't the giddy euphoria of a sudden victory, but a quiet, steady calm, like the surface of a deep lake after a violent storm. The haunting echoes of the past had faded, replaced by the resonant hum of purpose and the quiet joy of a life truly lived. This was not the end of my story, but a powerful new beginning, freed from the chains of old hurts, armed with the wisdom of hard-won experience, and ready to embrace a future rich with meaning and impact.